Good afternoon and welcome to day 3 of Art Gives Us Hope Festival. We are following a fantastic Tomorrow Show brunch special that just aired, hosted by Aaron, Mike, and AC with phenomenal guests on. And we're jumping right into a show that is going to be a regular part of the Hope for Us Network moving into 2022, but we really haven't had a chance to make it a sort of regular piece of programming. It's a show that I'll be facilitating and hosting called Raising the Visibility, where we're going to be meeting the intersection of mental health at cultural and social questions and discussion points. And today we wanted to get into this really, I guess, maybe introductory Raising the Visibility, even though we've had at least one episode earlier this year. We have a really special way to kick off with the network and with the festival today, because we're going to be talking with individuals who all have a shared unfortunate connection and taking a negative and turning it into a positive. And in each in their own ways, they're experts in exactly what the title says, suicide and prevention. We understand that the Hope for Us Network, when we talk about we're proactive prevention, we're talking about building education, building education for mental health to try to disrupt the highest risk factors for suicide and mental health crisis. And that's about starting conversations, normalizing mental health discussions, building education so we can recognize earliest signs and symptoms. But the reason we exist and the reason that we're striving to do that is because we live in environments and societies that are reactive to mental health. We don't talk about it and we don't bring it up until crisis blows up in our faces. And we live in cultures that spend a lot more time conditioning us to conceal and hide our mental health experiences until we can't anymore. And that's basically the long story short on how we deal with mental health in not just modern America or 21st century America or a social media, Facebook, millennial America. This is the way we've been dealing with mental health almost uniformly across all cultures and all geographies. Is it's very much reactive. We conceal things, we hide them, we operate under the false and inaccurate belief that when it comes to your thoughts, feelings, and emotions, there's this, you have a 100% control over what's happening to you. And while your brain power and your willpower and your sense of resilience gives you a great deal of control in how you're going to respond to the things that you experience or the things that you can be born with or develop inside your body, the fact is that when we talk about our mental health, it's not an abstract concept. It's as much a part of the reality of our bodies as dealing with a broken bone or catching a cold. When we have challenges with our mental health, there are layers of treatment and care that can be done on our own, in the same way that we might ice a broken ankle or not put weight on an injured limb, or we might try to self-treat a certain level of illness, fever, flu. But then we also know that there's a certain scale of unwellness for our bodies that requires us to escalate to professional supports and tools beyond our direct domain, and we recognize those as further medical responses. When it comes to our mental health, we barely, if at all, educate about our personal self-care tools beyond just trying to tell people that going for a walk or having a healthy diet is preventative or care or even a treatment response. And while those tools can contribute to helping, improving, and encouraging a stable or sustainable healthy mental health state, I'm going to work on that a little bit. That is not the spectrum when we talk about a total and comprehensive approach to responding to and effectively being proactive in our mental health. Moreover, we certainly don't talk about and normalize how we're going to treat and respond to crisis either. We have lifelines, there's hospitalizations, there's therapy, there's clinicians, there's things like this, but we never access those things till mental health becomes a problem for ourselves or someone we know. And when we talk about a problem, that isn't the moment that someone develops an issue. That's just the moment that someone's issues are no longer able to be concealed. So coming back to the full circle of this idea of living in this concealment culture, The Hope Fest Network is dedicated to trying to be proactive by breaking down the obstacles. Our goal is to close the gap between the onset of a mental health challenge and the point at which someone gets treatment, and not just wait for crisis or until things explode and blow up in our face. Because unfortunately, right now, as a reality, not only is mental health crisis an issue that we need to care about just because, mental health crisis, and specifically suicide, is an ever-escalating, I would say, public health crisis. And what we mean by that is that it's sad if we lose even one life. But the fact is that year over year, over the last 15 years, we've seen rates of harm and death by suicide climb. In 2016, according to the AFSP, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, they pegged that per day we're losing about 121 individuals to suicide. That's per day, 121. That was in 2016. As we stand right now, as of 2020, AFSP rates that at about 132 lives that die by suicide each day. And those are based on the total, the comprehensive, the cumulative statistics from the CDC. And that's just narrowing it to the United States of America. But we know that there's no prejudice on suicide. And we know that it impacts every region, every country, every corner of the globe. But that rate of escalation over just 4 and 5 years reflects an even larger problem of the fact that completion is one facet of undertreated and untreated mental health challenges. And there are millions upon millions of people who are right now living with challenges that they haven't necessarily reported. They don't have a clinical diagnosis for. Because we know there are millions upon millions of individuals who do have a clinical diagnosis, who are trying to get treatment and are trying to navigate their wellness in societies and systems that haven't fully appreciated and aren't fully and are somewhat stigmatizing. So it can actually be a challenge to get the proper supports. It can be a challenge to live with a mental health experience inside of a company, inside of a family, inside of a school, even just inside of your own head. There's so much to unpack, and these things aren't resolved with just one fancy commercial or one big power speech. What we need to do is to create a regular, ongoing conversation. And when we talk about that, why we call ourselves the network is that it can't just be reliant on just one person or one sort of speech that you can just take everywhere and hope everyone suddenly feels better about themselves or changes their game. You've got to be able to connect with individuals where they are. We've got to be able to meet people in different intersections. And when we talk about intersections, if you're not familiar with what that term means, we're talking about we need to be sensitive to cultural realities and social realities. We need to be sensitive to age and profession and where you are in your life at this moment. Having someone who has lived through experiences that you can relate to helps. Having people break down their silences who maybe they don't look like you, that can help. But we need to get everyone in this conversation. And so today, the title of Raising the Visibility is Suicide and Prevention, because suicide prevention in and of itself is one part of the puzzle, but we're going to be unpacking the realities around silence, and we're going to be unpacking the sort of deficiencies in prevention. With us today, we have a series of individuals who have taken it upon themselves to change the name of the game on responding to mental health and suicide prevention. So they're coming from different spaces, they're coming from different experiences, but we're all tied together with having a deep committed passion to not just believing, but knowing that we can do better, we can change, and we can improve and enhance what we're doing. And each person has found a way to try to make an impact in communities, both at a very large, broad scale, and very direct and focused, because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take all of us, both grassroots, macro, and micro, trying to work peer-to-peer. So what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce each one of our guests on camera and let them introduce themselves. We'll do a quick elevator, and then we're going to really dive into some discussion. So what I'd like to do, network, is first let's bring on Roger. We're going to first introduce Roger.
Good morning. Well, good afternoon your time.
That's right. We're like we said, we're calling from all over the place here.
We are.
Roger, thank you so much for joining us. And what I'd like to do is, why don't you introduce yourself first and your background and intersection into the mental health and suicide prevention discussion.
It's my background in that frame is really pretty precise and easy to describe. I answer calls on the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-8255. I've been doing it 4 hours a week now for 19 years. 4,000 hours I've spent answering calls on the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and I'm estimating 11 to 12,000 phone calls. So it's that experience that brings me to this conversation today, to whatever extent I can add to the conversation.
So you've really driven in on a hands-in direct level, and we're going to talk about the Lifeline today for sure. But you're also an author as well, and have contributed to bring and expand the story in another way that can help connect and impact people too. Could you touch on that a little bit?
Two books that I've published. The first one is it's the first of the two books. It's called Questions That Matter. It's a series of essays. Many of them come from my experiences, throughout my whole life, but many of them from the suicide hotline. My second book I just published a couple of months ago is called Humanity's Journey Home. It's really a more deeply philosophical look at the future of our species, Homo sapiens. And so it's got some metaphors and some connections to suicide prevention, but it's more about the future of our species.
And absolutely beautiful. And I think it's important though, because, and specifically talking about questions that matter, with all due respect to your most recent book, is we like the idea of creating a diverse approach that for some people, having a speech can work. For some folks, watching a video can work, but being able to access a literary avenue is just as essential. And I can't thank you enough for making time for us today. We're going to be talking a lot about the ideas around, especially from your intersection. You're meeting people oftentimes right at the crisis point.
Absolutely.
And so this is going to be a great piece of insight as we continue to expand this discussion. Next, we're going to bring on Sebastian. My voice is cracking, everyone, so excuse me if I'm drinking a lot of water. I've been talking a lot this weekend. Let's bring on Sebastian.
Hey.
Sebastian, tell us where you're from, brother. Good to see you.
Is my mic working?
Yes.
You can hear me good?
Yeah, you might want to speak up a little bit, but you're good.
All right. My name is Sebastian Klein. I'm the founder and main advocate for Angel Forever Foundation. My whole life, for as long as I can remember, I've suffered and been challenged with depression and anxiety mainly. And I've always had an interest in just trying to figure out, like, why do I feel this way? Why do I have the thoughts that I have? Why do I have the behaviors that I have? And always wondering, like, why am I so different from everybody else? So fast forward, in 2017, I lost my daughter, Angel, to suicide at 13 years old. And with all the experience that I had throughout my life, it was just beyond profound that I lost my own child to something that I had suffered with my whole life. And not, thinking that I knew so much, and realizing that I really didn't know, half of what I thought I knew. So I just immediately felt like I wanted to do something, and I wanted to be a part of what we're all doing here today. And so I created the foundation. And at first it was just really to be in memory of Angel, and just a little bit of work that I started doing within my own community. I'm in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois. It's like a couple hours south of Chicago. And it just created a lot of buzz around the community, and people became more and more interested. And so it's just grown to the point where now I consider myself a full-blown advocate for mental health awareness and educating on suicide prevention. And what Angel Forever focuses on, excuse me, is Angel had a story to tell because she suffered in silence, but she did a lot of journaling and did a lot of hidden social media stuff. And once I got access to all of that, it was like I realized there was a whole side to my daughter that I didn't know and that nobody knew. And so my main focus is to fill that void of silence because pain isn't always obvious. And that's where I'm at.
Thank you so much, Sebastian. Thank you for sharing. I'm glad you're here. And we're going to bring on our next guest as we continue to talk about these topics in depth. We've got Laura. Laura, are you with us here? Hello, Laura. Laura, I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me now? Sorry.
We got you.
All right. So thanks so much for having me. I am Laura Kane. I'm the founder and executive director of Marshmallow's Hope nonprofit organization. We are located in Rockford, Illinois, but my story is actually much like Sebastian's. First of all, Sebastian, I want to say I'm really, really sorry for the loss of your daughter. I actually lost my 14-year-old son, Zachary, to suicide in 2018. So I'm walking in your shoes and totally understand your pain. And, you know, same thing with me. My story is very similar. I thought, you know, that I was the mom that like did everything right. But unfortunately, I wasn't educated in this very topic of the importance of mental health. And I, you know, didn't understand words like mental illness, depression, suicide. And so I, in my own journey of healing and trying to find answers, I went back to school to try to educate myself. And then it led me to want to be the voice for those who suffer in silence, just like my son and like Sebastian's daughter. And so that's how Marshmallow's Hope was born, was just trying to be that voice for those kids out in our communities that feel that they don't have one. I want them to know that they're not alone and that we're here for them.
Thank you so much, Laura, for joining us. And thank you for sharing. And the other guest that we're going to have on for this discussion is Vikki. Vikki, if we could have you come on. Hi, Vikki. Thank you for joining us.
Can you see me?
Yes, we can.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. My name is Vikki Webster. I am the executive director and founder of the Reginald Sewell Foundation. My heart goes out to the two of you, Laura and Sebastian, on the loss of your child. I didn't lose a child. I lost my first brother, Reginald, in 2016 to suicide. We didn't have any clues or any idea that you know was going to transpire. So it really catapulted our family. And at that time, we decided to start a foundation to raise awareness. During that time, my brother Paul was a big advocate for the foundation. He went off to the Army, continued with his life. He had struggled in high school, though he showed no signs really of suicide until maybe his senior year, and he spoke more vocally about it. But again, we had him in counseling. He still excelled. He was a quarterback in football, state wrestling, state, you know, for track. So everyone kind of viewed him as a golden child and didn't see that coming. Unfortunately, in 2018, Paul took his life as well. So on my end, and I tell Carl this all the time, it's not just the stigma in certain areas or certain neighborhoods or certain age. It's all across. It's for everyone. And my focus is to bring us more aware of these disabilities, to be more aware that if someone has an issue, a behavioral health issue that you seek help for, or reach out to other resources that can connect you to help as well In our community, the African American and some brown communities, it's taboo to say that you're mentally challenged, or people just don't like to talk about it. They sweep it under the rug. And that's a stigma and a barrier that I'm trying to break, because what it does not allow for people to seek the adequate and appropriate treatment that they do deserve. So we've just been a voice, we've been advocating, and my focus again is not just in our community but in all communities, but especially with a concentration on maybe the younger generation, because now there are so many things on social media reach out.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for that, Vikki. If we have any, just as a side note, Vikki, if you or anyone else feels like they're having, I think we're having just a little bit of a lag with you, Vikki.
When they're not feeling their best.
Okay. Thank you there, Vikki. And in case if you feel like you're having a little lag, sometimes if you turn your camera off a little bit, that might give you more bandwidth sometimes. So we'll bear with it just in case if anyone feels like they're having issues, because we're coming from different areas. But thank you all for joining us. I've had the privilege, and this is what I meant by the good news and bad news. I've had the privilege to organically intersect with all of you in the work that I've been doing in these spaces. And it's important to recognize the way that you've elected to take on an initiative. And one of the things I'd like to start this discussion with is to talk about this running concept about the hiddenness, okay? And I'm going to be prompting different questions, but if at any time you want to jump in, please do. But for Laura and Sebastian, both of you shared in the unfortunateness of the hiddenness in a way. You touched on that. Starting from, we'll go Laura and then Sebastian. What for you was realizing, when things finally emerged, what was kind of like your initial gut response to that, the recognition that things were hidden? I mean, I'm sure it's shocking, right? But like, when we talk about mental health and the way people spend so much time concealing their challenges, knowing that now, can you reflect on sort of looking back, what was that like for you at the initial points?
Well, so for me, I mean, obviously, yeah, there was that initial shock, right? Like my kid was the happiest kid on the planet, honestly. There were no signs, no diagnoses, no, things like that. And so as his mother, I wanted answers, and I wanted to know like what happened, what was going on. And I started to really like dive into trying to look into like just doing research. Why would someone take their own life? Like what, and I mean, unfortunately to this day, I'm never gonna have the true whys that I was trying to find. But what I did find is that, number one, our whole entire nation lacks resources for people who are struggling, people who are living with mental illness. We also have formed this stigma that, especially for men and especially for young boys, we raise our boys with like the suck it up buttercup mentality that, it's not okay. It doesn't make you a man if you cry out for help or reach out for help. And so I think that is what I found the most, I guess, shocking, was that just going about my day, going about my life, I didn't realize that those things were actual true issues that are leading people to take their life by suicide, because they are suffering in silence. There aren't enough resources. They're not getting the help that they deserve, and they're not allowed basically to talk about it, So for me, it was just really, just trying to find the answers that, again, I'm never going to get, but trying to be the light for those who, like my Zachary, are living and suffering in silence.
Thank you. Sebastian, going to that same sort of in the way that Zachary, I think, and when I ask about the hiddenness, it's really the vehicle. So Zachary had a game face. We find that sometimes when people are living with challenges, it's the ones they love the most that they're the most silent. And then Sebastian, you slightly talked about that when you finally got access to social media. So in a way, you kind of had a little trap door into the hiddenness in a very specific way.
Yeah. So just to clarify, what specifically is the question?
No. It's more of just asking about your initial response to realizing that, these things were hidden, that everything on the surface seemed fine. And
right. Yeah, definitely. I always say that, Angel's story is kind of classic in the sense that she was a straight A student, appeared to be happy on the outside 99% of the time. I was aware that she had developed some issues because she had started self-harming, and I found a therapist that specialized in self-harming, specifically with teens. But unfortunately, she had only had 3 sessions with her before she took her life. So there wasn't even really a chance to develop any type of relationship or form any kind of real diagnosis. But again, we had a very open, transparent relationship. So I thought, and talked about things that a lot of parents tell me, well, my child would never discuss those things with me. So it was another reason why I didn't feel like anything was really being hidden. Like, I didn't fall asleep at night worried that she was going to take her life. I fell asleep at night worried about the things that I already knew, and thought that I was taking the proper steps to get a handle on them, so to speak. So yeah, it was after, the interesting thing is her journals and her diary were all in her room, just sitting on her desk, like there for the taking. I could have looked in them at any point in time. It's not like they were hidden away in a drawer somewhere and she was really keeping it a secret. So it was almost like she was kind of wanting someone to find them and read them and have them find out that way. But I never did, because it was like a respect thing. I wanted to respect her privacy. So I never thought like, oh, I'm going to go look in her diary kind of thing. And obviously now I wish I had, but it was after reading through those and then finding social media accounts that she had where she literally posted things like pictures of herself with tears running down her face saying, I wish I could just die right now. Or if I died tonight, would anybody care? And what really struck me was there was comments from people on these photos, and no one ever stopped to, contact me or to recommend like, oh, you should try calling the Suicide Lifeline, or you should, talk to a therapist. They were all comments like almost encouraging about self-harm, or, it was really a shock. And they were all coming from other teenagers. Well, I can only assume. Who knows who's really behind the screen. But, just side note, if you go to Instagram and you type in, you can do hashtag self-harm, or like even any type of self-harm, and you will get hundreds of profiles of kids that are obviously suffering and suicidal, posting things that you just wouldn't even believe. And it completely blows my mind that they're on there to begin with. But the fact that there's so many comments from people that encourage whatever it is that they're posting, and encourage the thought of continuing to self-harm and continuing to have suicidal thoughts, rather than, doing something to encourage them getting help. So it goes, when you really go down the rabbit hole of what's going on specifically with teens and young adults today, especially on social media, there's a huge gap of things that need to be monitored, and really, like, I mean, I wouldn't even know where to begin on how to take care of something like that. But it's out there, and it's really, it's just sad. So that was why I chose with Angel Forever to specifically stick to Angel's story. So I do speaking events, and I go around. And now I actually have a space called the Foundation Room, which is totally awesome. And I can just do everything out of here. But I really focus on telling her story in the hopes that other people will identify with it and then step forward and want to tell their story. And so far, it's had an amazing impact. Better than what I ever expected. I do these events called storytellers, where people can volunteer to come in and tell their story, or speak on a specific life event that they had that's affected their mental health. And it's amazing how, even if I just have a room with 10 people in it, 9 of those 10 people come in terrified and very silent. And by the end of the storyteller, they're all gathered around talking about experiences that they have, or, how they felt about something that happened in their life, or someone that they knew that for the first time, they're telling anyone that they knew someone close to them that died by suicide. And it's just the organic way that people just start to open up. I wish I could do it on, a massive scale, but maybe one day I'll get there.
And thank you for bringing that up, because that's kind of where I was going with that, is that I've noticed that for all of you, it could have been, you could have signed up with one of the pre-existing organizations and carried the flag, and there's a value and importance to that. But each of your specific missions have really come out of an origin of you really deciding to try to process and be very specific to what you felt your experiences with loss were like. And Laura, could you sort of talk, you started a little bit right in the introduction, but I wanted to carry on with what Sebastian is talked about here, and that your response, how you basically, Marshmallow's Hope is a very customized approach too, based very much from what you were learning and pulling out from your responses to Zachary's passing. Could you talk a little bit more about that with what Marshmallow's was focused on?
Yeah. So, same thing with Zach. So, I mean, I was that mom that like was going through his phone constantly, right? But unfortunately, with like Snapchat, when kids post things, they're only on their story for so long and then they go away. Well, he was posting from April of 2018 until September of 2018, much like your daughter, same thing, pictures of himself saying, somebody talk to me before I die. Or, I don't want to live anymore. I'm so tired of being depressed. And so anyhow, I took, in the middle of me grieving and at my worst, I like became obsessed with like going through his Snapchat again, trying to find answers. And so what I did is I started posting motivational things on his Snapchat for all of his friends and trying to let them know that like, hey, when you see something like this, you need to take action. You need to respond to it. You need to like alert an adult, let somebody know, because nobody came to me, right? But I was also trying to encourage them to keep living. Like, if you are feeling like this, please contact the suicide hotline. And so that led me to, kids who started talking to me and opening up to me about their own depression, their own anxiety, their own thoughts of suicide. And I started picking up kids one-on-one, taking them out to eat. And so we would go do, fun things even during COVID. And so I started, when I saw that was having like a really positive impact in the community, I thought about why not create a one-on-one mentorship program, And so the main program of Marshmallow's Hope is called Hero Mentors. And what we do is we just go out, we mentor kids 9 to 19 who are living with anxiety, depression, suicidal ideations, or who have been victims of child abuse. And we also offer all the kids in our program 100% free counseling. We want to make sure that not only, we realize that these kids aren't going to open up to their parents. They're not going to open up to the people that they love most because number one, they already feel like they're a burden to them. And number two, they want to protect them from their thoughts. They want to protect them from the pain that they're feeling. And so by us giving these kids a mentor or somebody that they can confide with, then we have a better chance of being able to alert parents when we see that they are struggling, right? In the same token, we're helping them work on bettering their mental health by offering the free counseling services for all the kids. But unfortunately, my mission, and I never envisioned it, like my focus for Marshmallows was always going to be the youth because of my son. And during COVID, unfortunately, one of my personal mentors lost her son to suicide as well. And the young man was a veteran. And so it hit me again, as if it had happened, like as if I was going through it all over again. And I really wanted to step up and do something for the veteran community to bring some sort of preventive method. And so then I started to think, well, how can I help the veterans and the servicemen? And I thought about the hero program. Well, who are the heroes? These guys are already the heroes, right? So I'm also an author. And so long story short, it led me to somebody reaching out to me about my book. Can you send a copy of your book to this mom? We are located at an Air Force base, and unfortunately, we lost somebody to suicide. And when I started talking to this young man, he told me about how many suicides were occurring on this Air Force base during COVID, and I felt really compelled to do something. And so, like, literally within a week and a half, I was on a plane to California, and we've now teamed up with Edwards Air Force Base to bring the Hero Mentor Program. So what we're doing is we're combining this mentorship program, because what we're doing, since we realize that servicemen and women and veterans are not going to reach out because of the stigma that surrounds mental illness, by them mentoring these kids, we're giving these guys a protective factor. If they do get into that darkness themselves, if they are struggling, if I take my life, what's it going to do to this kid that I'm mentoring? I'm setting that example for them. And so the child actually becomes a protective factor for these veterans and for these servicemen. And really, truly, like it's humbling to see how much the program is really like taking a preventive approach and creating positivity around our community and around our nation. We're taking it one step further. Locally, we're now going to be teaming up and bringing the HERO program to first responders, because again, they're part of an adult community that don't reach out for help because of that stigma. And so my goal, and again, I never like envisioned any of this, you know, but my goal is to help prevent suicide, period, whether it's an adult, whether it's a child, but my focus is going to be on the heroes of our country and the future leaders of America, which are the youth. And so the Hope for Us Network actually has been a huge part of this initiative, which I absolutely love. They do all of our training for our Hero Mentors program. We put all the mentors through a resilience training to plant those seeds that it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to ask for help, you know. And we also offer them the counseling services and the support that they need to know that they're not alone and that we're here to support them.
Thank you so much, Laura.
Yeah.
And this is, in carrying this forward, you know, when Vikki, Reggie showed no signs necessarily, as it were. Paul, you got into treatment, you know, seemingly, and you felt like you were on a response. And something I want to carry forward from what Sebastian and Laura are talking about is the fact that the concealment and how it shaped both Reggie and Paul have a sense of, you know, they didn't necessarily fit traditional ideas of mental health challenges, right? Because I think people want to be able to appreciate, well, there's teens and youth, and okay, maybe they could have troubles. But then you talk about African-American culture, you talk about older, young adult males, and there's not a lot of visibility there. And that's a hiddenness in its own way. Could you talk about the way you crafted the programming that the Sewell Foundation takes on, the original Sewell Foundation takes on? I don't know if that came up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And I hope you guys can hear me. It sounds like I'm breaking up. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Again, with Reginald, there were really no direct signs. His was sudden. He was 22. And again, Paul, because he was in the service, he had some issues prior to entering the Army. Even in high school, you know, we stated we had him in counseling, and my sister and the rest of the family. But I happened to be Paul's safe person. So fortunate and unfortunately, I was one of the people that I guess he trusted to discuss his mental health issues, and he was very vocal about it. And again, he did have a therapist that he sought, and you know, the treatment there was pretty positive. But I think after Reginald's death, it probably something to make him even more adamant about taking his life. But as I stated, he still excelled at everything. So that's why when people talk about wanting to know the reason, or I didn't see any signs, I saw every sign. You know, my family and I, we did see signs. My sister, who raised Paul after my parents were elderly, he lived in her house, and, you know, she saw signs. She was, you know, kind of afraid that once he moved on his own, that he would actually be able to execute ending his life, and he did so. So for me, you know, we advocate in different ways. We put on different events and seminars, symposiums, because I'm trying to educate and also lure in the younger adults, because both of my brothers were 21 and 22. So we'll do a mental health awareness that's around music. Rap is huge. So we've got some local rap artists that can talk about their challenges and how they turn their pain into purpose through music. Then we're able to reach young individuals on that hand. We've done some things with the Veterans Association as well, because Paul is an Army veteran, to talk about those young soldiers who are struggling while in boot camp and even afterwards. We're also advocating for inmates. There are a lot of people, young men and women in the Department of Corrections that probably should not be incarcerated, but maybe in a treatment facility. So I advocate for services for them while they're incarcerated and also once released back into population. So for me, Carl, you know this, we've been working together for years, and I appreciate the work that you've brought, and I've learned so much from working with you, is to, as much as we see people on social media, liking and unfortunately commenting about I'm so depressed, will someone come and talk to me, then we just have to flood social media with the positive, if you're feeling upset, here's a suicide hotline number. If you're a veteran in trouble, here's another number. Here's a resource. I just flood my page with resources, and maybe one person may like it. I don't care. I just kept doing it because I need to reach the young adults. And you can see people, they're viewing it, but they're less likely to like it or, whatever, and that's fine. I'm like Laura, I have young people that have confided in me since my brother's death, and I've been kind of an advocate for them and getting them in counseling and help. So for me, it just doesn't end with my two brothers. It's not just their stories, it's everyone's stories. And anyone that knows me knows that they can call me at any time and I'm going to find a resource. Now I'm thinking how I can connect with Laura because we have a similarity. So, together we can make a difference. We have to get people in to seek mental health treatment. That's really where it starts. And for you, Laura, and knowing, it's been 5 years for Reggie and 3 years for Paul. And I finally came to the realization that I don't need to know why. I just, know that whatever it was a decision that was derived from an illness. And if we can get people to come in to be treated, then we can make a difference, and the why will go away because we've done so much to help other people. So
absolutely, I agree. Thank you, Vikki.
Thank you, Vikki. And it's because of these, and I want, if you're listening right now and watching right now, or you're going to engage this content after the festival weekend, I hope you're paying attention that these are very three diverse, vastly different intersections that you're coming from. And there's drop-down menus of conversations that need to head. When we're talking about with Angel, there's a lot to unpack there where we're talking about it. There's the age part, there's the gender part, there's the social media use, especially in younger individuals. Laura, you had tapped into already talking about with Zachary. We understand the male, the toxic masculinity is a drop-down menu. We can talk about the different ways in which, again, the age plays a role. And Vikki, we also talked about cultural parts, but I want people to pay attention that it's not just a one set thing. It's not like each individual who is struggling and being challenged with mental health experiences, it's just one thing. Oh, you had a clown. This is not to, I don't want to use somebody's real story, so I'm just going to say it this way. It's not a clown scared you and you're forever scared of clowns, and if you just unravel your fear of clowns, your mental health is fine. There's multifaceted things, and it robs somebody's life to think that mental health can just be distilled down to it's one topic or another. Look at all the different things that Sebastian, Laura, and Vikki have had to confront, and the different programmings you've developed, because it isn't just a matter of you can come up with one little elevator speech and that'll help save others' lives. And I want to turn to Roger here, because in each case, for Sebastian, Laura, and Vikki, you're creating outlets and platforms for people to turn to. And you've all remarked how when you started talking, when you started to raise the visibility and break the silence, people came to you. People needed to share their stories. They connected. And Roger, unfortunately, you operate in a space where a lot of times it's for the people who feel like they don't have anywhere to turn. And I kind of want to just start right there, that's the Lifeline. People can be cynical about the Lifeline. We're not here to sugarcoat things, but the Lifeline has a service. And I want to talk about the fact that you are oftentimes talking with people when they feel like they don't have anywhere to turn. Is that a consistent qualification?
Absolutely. The thing that pains me the most is the people who don't call. Obviously, we can do our best to help the people who do. I get far too many calls, especially from young people, but from people of all ages who say, I'm suffering, I'm thinking about ending my life, and nobody knows. Nobody knows. So that's really hard to convince people that they need to reach out. And two of the reasons people give me for why they haven't told anyone is one, I don't want to disappoint people. People think that I'm fine. One young woman that called in high school, she said, you don't understand. I'm the strong one in my friend group. I help everyone else and I love helping them, but I'm the strong one. If they think that I'm suffering, I'll be a disappointment to them. And I don't want to be a burden in someone else's life. Those are her two reasons why she wasn't telling anyone. And of course, the obvious question was, when your friends come to you, because she loved helping her friends, when your friends come to you, are you disappointed in them? Oh, heavens no, are you kidding me? I'm so gifted by the fact that they would trust me. It's a gift in my life. And do you see them as a burden? No, I love helping them. It's tremendous. So it's a gift in her life. And my question to her is, why are you withholding that gift from someone else? Someone else who could help you. But there's far too many people who say the last thing I would do is, especially young people, and let's remind people there is a texting helpline, 741-741. If you text a word like start or help, because many young people, quite frankly, because of social media and because of texting, they're much less comfortable having a real-time conversation with another human being. Texting gives you the opportunity to pause and think and respond or not respond. So if people want help and they're not comfortable talking to a person real time, 741-741 is a wonderful additional resource besides the National Lifeline, 1-800-273-8255. But, I congratulate all of you. Telling our stories is so critical. I talked to a senior, an elder in Las Vegas when I was out there once. And he said that he had, when he was younger, often thought about suicide and had written quite a bit about it. And I asked him if he had shared that with his grandchildren. And his answer was understandable, but so wrong. His answer was, I don't want to burden them with my problems. And I looked at him because he was living in a wonderful retirement community. And I said, but your grandchildren probably think that you skated through life without ever having a problem. And now you're living in this beautiful retirement community. So when they're struggling, well, grandpa didn't struggle, so I must be doing life incorrectly. So it's important for all of us to begin to tell our stories to make it clear to everyone that life is hard. Life is often really, really hard for all of us. And that makes it more comfortable, especially for young people, to say the fact that I'm struggling doesn't mean that I'm failing, doesn't mean that I'm wrong, doesn't mean that I'm somehow not doing life correctly. So congratulate all of you. I think telling our stories is critical, and getting more stories out there is absolutely essential.
Thank you, Roger. And that's a question I'm going to prompt to all three of you is, you have all taken and making the effort to really try to find a way to connect with target groups. You're intuitively listening. You're not just sort of assuming, well, you know what, I'm going to do it this way and people are going to like it or hate it. You found a way to customize yourselves to a need that you're able to see. When you're doing your work, though, and I'm going to ask each of them, have you ever gotten, especially because there's a youth connection, a lot of them, have you ever engaged with someone who, what's it been like when you talk to maybe a parent or another, let's say an adult in the case of youth-focused things, who's kind of like, why would you do it that way? You know what I'm saying? Like, have any of you ever had a sort of oppositional or sort of obstinate response to your efforts from that? Like, they just they don't validate the mental health thing? Anyone want to talk about that a little bit?
I can talk about it. Yeah. So like with our program, unfortunately, I deal with parents all the time who feel that their children are just crying out for attention. They don't want anything to truly be wrong with their child. They don't want to admit that there is, that there is something that is causing their children to self-harm or to make an attempt. 90% of the kids that come to our program, they come to our program after they have attempted suicide. And luckily they have all survived. But my biggest hurdle in getting these kids the help that they need is that their parents really believe that this is only a cry out for attention. And so I get frustrated because to me, it's like, okay, if your child is crying out for attention, then why don't we figure out why they're seeking this attention, to try to kind of like bridge that gap between the parent, the parent's way of thinking. And it's just, it's frustrating. And then I've also met the people, like even my loved ones who I guess worry about me. Why are you so consumed with Marshmallow's hope? Like, why are this is all that you live for now? You still have children that are alive. And it kills me because to me, I am doing this for the children that I have left here in this world that are still alive. I'm doing this to show them that we need to persevere through the pain. We need to find purpose in our pain. We need to keep going because when we get to a hopeless state of mind, when we get to that hopeless point in our lives, that's where I feel that people truly want to give up on themselves, So if we instill hope in people who are feeling hopeless, like that's how we're going to help prevent suicide, and that's how we're going to help them keep going. And so I'm just trying to be that example for my own kids. I mean, of course, it would be easier for me to lay in bed and, not want to do anything and torture myself with the thoughts of the whys, the what ifs, the should haves. And people do lash out, like, why is he so consumed by this? But it's not that at all. It's just giving other people hope so that nobody has to walk in my shoes.
That's good. Thank you so much, Laura. Sebastian and Vikki, I saw you nodding your heads if you wanted to throw anything in there. I don't,
Yeah, I've been nodding my head a lot because I agree with everything that I'm hearing, and it's just, I'm identifying with so much of it because I've dealt with a lot of the same things that you just mentioned, Laura. Like what is just astonishing to me is I've had parents tell me, well, I think what you're doing is amazing. And like, I'm so thankful that you're doing the work that you're doing, but I don't feel like I have to worry about that kind of thing with my family. And it's, I think there's a lot of reasons behind that thought process, but I guess just from my experience, I think that it's due to mainly the stigma behind mental health and what you were saying, Laura. They don't want to deal with the shame because of whatever what's the right word to use, whatever lifestyle that particular family might be living. There might be something behind closed doors that they feel like, oh, well, if I admit to all of my friends that my child is depressed, that's going to cause a lot of damage in our relationships. So it's like my blood starts to boil when I talk about this because you just want to take these people and shake sense into them. But unfortunately,
compassionate shaking.
It's not that easy. But I just made a post recently about how one of the most frequent questions that I get asked by parents is, well, how do I tell the difference between normal teen behavior and, you know, what you're talking about and what you dealt with, you know, with Angel. And my response is always exactly the same. And it's, you know, one of the most frequent questions that I ask myself is, well, if I had known what I know now back then, and B, just been more proactive about, you know, talking to her specifically about the things that I could see were going on. You know, I asked questions and we had conversations, but now I feel like I didn't ask enough questions and I didn't have enough conversation. I still allowed Angel to control the conversations. And now I have a full understanding, which is, again, why I think it's so important that I do break my own silence and speak out about this, because it's all in the hope that other parents will identify with my story and that other teens will identify with Angel's story and get a much better understanding of how to recognize the difference between a normal teen behavior and, you know, true hidden suffering. And so they ask me that question, and I tell them, you know, my unequivocal response. But it's also just really trying to drive home that even if you have kids that aren't suffering, where is the wrong in getting educated on mental health and getting educated on suicide prevention and how to handle those signs and risk factors if they should appear? You know, like, why you say it all the time, like, why wait until there's a crisis? The whole point is to, you know, reach people before they get to the ledge, not wait until they're on the ledge and talking them down. So, you know, I think I'm kind of changing gears a little bit, but I think with this pandemic,
Give me a minute.
our teens were suffering so much already. Now with this pandemic and all the isolation and the increased amount of social media activity, because that's literally all they have.
I hear you, man.
I agree wholeheartedly. You know, I mean, I think that isolation is absolutely the worst thing that somebody who's already hurting can go through. They already feel alone, and we're forcing them to be alone, right? And so, yeah, I wholeheartedly, I feel your pain. I totally agree.
So for me, if I can speak a little bit, my brother Paul was very candid about his behavioral health issues. He was very candid also about taking his life. So when people say, you know, talk to them more, be more active, we could have been more active. You know, Paul was at our house, my husband and I, children. And again, when my parents became older, my younger sister raised all of the children, including her own. So we were all very active, you know, my other siblings in their lives. But for whatever reason, he chose me to be a safe person, to talk about how much he didn't like himself, how much everything he was doing and excelling and achieving was because he felt others wanted him to. but he would still be very candid that at some point he would want to take his life. And again, as you said, isolation. I know for a fact he would not have been able to survive the pandemic. That would have been a very challenging time, I'm sure, for our whole family, with him to be isolated, be around people. I think that's what kept him going. But I don't have the issues with parents because I guess Reggie and Polly were 21 and 22. So the group that I'm usually dealing with are older teens and young adults. But I know there's a lot of people who can't stand how many posts that I post or all the pictures that I post. You know, they're depressing. Why do you? Because this is indicative to show you that there wasn't a day that didn't go by in these boys' lives that we weren't involved in something as a family. So any memory that pops up, I love it. They go all the way back to 2009. There's a memory every day on my feed of something we did together, and that showed you there's love there. You can love someone, you can give them love, you can do as much as you can, but at the end of the day, whatever, like I said, that final decision is something that I want to know what was so strong to make the final decision. And that's something I keep telling you that I have to just push that to the side. But for me, and I tell people I'm not a clinical person, I'm not a licensed person, make sure that I have a trained clinical person at any event that I have so that they can answer those type of questions. But speaking from a layman's term and speaking from someone whose family did everything possible, you know, to have someone in counseling, talking to them, you know, just cooking every Sunday, you know, just being there. Today's not a good day. What can I do for you? You know, can we just go eat? I mean, those are things that you can do and you can be active. The person, again, Paul would talk a lot about ending his life, you know, and I would be terrified once he left my house. So you don't know is where I'm going with this, I guess, Carl. You know, you can do everything possible, you know, and then at the end of the day, that feeling of just hopelessness is what can consume you. And that's what I decided. I refuse to. You know, both of my brothers live vigorous lives. So to not continue to live because of their deaths, I couldn't see myself doing that. And I could see them rallying and championing for me to do these things. And I talk to them often and I'm like, this is where we're at, you know, because you guys aren't here anymore. I'm angry with you, but then look what you're doing for other young people, you know. So again, pain into purpose. Some people aren't going to tell you, you know, there's, you know, I didn't want to go through Paul's phone. I didn't want to go through Reggie's phone. I didn't want to do any of that because of the conversations that Paul and I had prepared me that he would. I didn't think that it would be this soon. You know, I thought maybe he'd have kids or later down the line. But again, questions we'll never have answers to. And we just have to keep providing resources and doing what you're doing, Laura, and taking time with other young children who need the resource of someone to at least be able to talk to. And I still tell my brother's friends and other people that I meet, you know, it's an open door. Reach out if you need someone to talk to. Again, if you need resources. So I think that's what we have to continue to do. And again, Carl, as I stated too, stigmas with the African American community, it's taboo. It looks bad. You know, Black men crying or saying they have a behavioral health issue, or even in religion, some churches are not trying to hear about suicide. They don't want to, that's not acceptable, you know, or even behavior health. Oh, they're okay. We'll pray for them. No. Praying, yes, fine. But this person has an issue. It takes more than prayer. So let's be realistic. If I have hypertension and they're telling me that I need to have open heart surgery, I'm not going to pray that away. That's why doctors are here. That's why God anointed doctors. So let's, you know, end these stigmas that we have in our cultures and our communities so that these people can get help that they deserve it.
Thank you, Vikki. And that kind of, you know, Sebastian, when you brought up the pandemic, and I'm glad that you said what you said there, Vikki, because where I wanted to go with the next part of this conversation is really about the fact that the barriers that we talk about when people stay silent, and we cannot ever control any individual's decisions. But the barriers that stay silent, and if you've been following through the festival weekend and any other time you hear about the network, we're talking about this, that stigma isn't just a buzzword, it's social and cultural factors. And as much as there's personal silencing things, there's also external things that aren't evil and nasty. It's not just, I think sometimes it'd be convenient if people thought that it's just like this big caricature of a bully that's shouting at people, being like, you're weak for having mental health issues and things like that. But there's actually unintentional things that reinforce silences. And sometimes they come from places that can be good. Our place of faith, which is our internal sense of spirituality, can also open a door to an organized space like a church or a religion that can be silencing. We can have an athletic connection and find self-value and worth on a sports team, but there could also be toxic masculinity. We could be part of a social group of friends. You know, you're 12, 13, 14 years old, and you've got a group of friends. Friends are great. We love them. It's wonderful. But your friends could be laughing at people's mental health challenges or something they see in pop culture, and that could make someone silent. The pandemic is its own new form of a silencing obstacle. And I'm glad that you brought this up, Sebastian, because I think it's something where there are folks who are talking about it generally, but I think we need to just go ahead and embrace that, like, we're only going to see the aftershocks. And Roger, I want to underscore this point. The importance of talking and telling our stories now seems more essential than ever. And that we shouldn't wait for the aftershocks. And I kind of want to start this sort of talking into this a little bit more, in that, Roger, when people call, because you're still actively on the job, as it were, sometimes, right now, are you, unfortunately, and I know the answer to this, but what has the center been like, for your capacity, what's it been like in pandemic forward?
I get asked this question a lot. Are there more calls as a result of the pandemic? The research will show eventually that yes, the calls have been up, the suicide is up, depression, anxiety are all up. I can't judge that because I have such a small window. Plus, what I always say to people, for the time that I'm answering calls on a suicide hotline, there always have been, there are now, and there always will be more calls than I can take. We're desperately short of volunteers all across the country, certainly in our call center in Batavia. So I can't judge from my own personal experience, but I will say that it has been hard. It has been hard, especially on young people. Interestingly enough, though, because sometimes high school can be a very, very difficult place for some teens, especially those teens who don't quite fit the norm. I've heard from some teens that they were very thankful for the going virtual because they didn't have to go into that very difficult place every day. That being home was a bit of a sanctuary for them. So it's a little bit of a both and, I think. It has been very difficult for many teens, but let's not forget there are some. Let's not forget that high school can be a very difficult bullying place for many young people, especially, like I say, those who don't quite fit the mold. But the answer to your question, Carl, is I'm sure the research will show as we begin to document. The Centers for Disease Control will document. It's usually a year later. They'll document, the numbers of suicides and so forth by demographics and age groups, and I'm sure all of those will be up. I think there's very little question in anybody's mind. But my own personal experience, I can't tell because there are just always more calls than I can take. Always have been, and there still are today.
And that's fair. But that's also consistent with what we don't want to sugarcoat things or create a false sense that it's one way or the other. And I'd like, let's talk about that a little bit, of the fact that isolation is brutal. But yeah, what if, and we just had one of our artists and guests in day 2, who is the artist who did the designs for our event posters. Their they talked about that a large body of their survival with intensive mental health challenges, their connections are digitally based. That they found communities through the internet and whatnot. And I think that it's an important thing to think about, is that if you look at what Vikki and Laura and Sebastian, what you all have been talking about, none of you have shunned away from the social media aspect. You've all tried to figure out a way to put energy out on those platforms. And that's, I think, essential, because there are sort of cynical or very hostile, like, it's all bad. It's all, everyone needs to just get outside, get a jump rope, play some basketball, and there'd never ever be any mental health issues, and it'd all go away. What are your thoughts on just sort of continuing to comment on the pandemic has been isolating, but do you believe or see a value in trying? I mean, you already are, so maybe this is a setup question, but just, do you see a powerful tool in terms of being able to communicate digitally as well? If nothing more, as a counteraction. Anyone have any feelings about that? Vikki, you elaborated on that a lot too. Anyone else want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I can talk about it. I mean, so social media is the future, right? And I mean, in today's society, like, that is the way that our kids are communicating. And we have to find a way to reach these kids, right? What better way to do it than in the environment that they're comfortable doing it in, which is social media. I mean, I don't think that social media is the devil. However, I do think that it gives people the ability to, for example, with cyberbullying. When we were younger, bullying at school stopped at 3 p.m. Nowadays, cyberbullying can go on 24/7. It can go on for weeks, and then people can pile that on. And so that can be mentally wearing for somebody who is already living with that anxiety and depression. But in the other end of the spectrum, it can also be for somebody who has, major social anxiety. Like, it's a really great way for that person, that individual, to still be connected. And especially like with Zoom and with things like this, like, now we have the ability to spread our message on a massive scale, right? We can spread our message worldwide if we do it. Like, we can use these tools to raise awareness and again, communicate in the way that these kids are going to do it. They're going to communicate anyway. So mental illness doesn't discriminate, and I think that one point that we really need to make in this conversation is that whether it's via social media or whether it's in person, I mean, people need to feel connected. And suicide derives from an untreated mental illness. So we need to just be vigilant in our efforts to continue to raise awareness. And we do need to utilize the tools of, the Hope for Us Network and Twitch and TikTok and all of these, live stream ways. Like, this is the stepping stone to helping people feel that, or understand that they're not alone, and that it's okay to reach out for help, and that it's okay to have a teenager or a kid who really needs help. Like, these are the conversations that we need to have so that people really truly understand that we can help prevent suicides if we just help the ones suffering. Educate yourselves on the signs. That was huge for me. I didn't know the signs, but now that I'm aware, I'm like, okay, I can check this off and this off and this off. And yeah, my kid was struggling and I didn't know. I thought it was normal, So anyway.
No, it's good. That's, that reminds me about, and again, Roger, when you're talking about sharing stories, I hope it's not missed by the fact that each of you, Laura, Vikki, and Sebastian, talking about your own learning processes, especially, and it doesn't just have to be the parent, but I think showing the vulnerability that you're learning and growing and responding to this, and not shutting down the potential that, oh, it wasn't our fault, there wasn't something going on. I always think of it, there was an advocate that I've had the pleasure of knowing named Mary Blanchard, who described it as not in my house syndrome, as a response for silence. And it's one thing to talk about if we're trying to ask people to support a child, a family member, brother, or sister, but even just willing to be vulnerable, the way that each of you is willing to open up about what you are learning and what you're taking away, I think that's just as critical to this whole conversation. That story, Roger, you told about the older gentleman who's now a grandfather. I hope you all give yourselves enough credit for the fact that the essentialness of talking about the love that you've lost is at a core, but even just being a beacon that's willing to put yourselves out there and talk about your learning process too. We may not all be the person who's in pain or trying to navigate or suffering, but we all can be someone who can be a peer to others, support others. And, we will never know who has a diagnosis with illness or who's been traumatized, in number, but gosh darn it, that connection thing that you're talking about, Laura, I think that is so powerful that we all have the power to be the peer supporter to someone else. And I'd like to ask all of you, starting with Roger, what do you think what has been for you effective ways, because you're out in the public, you're out in the world, what have been effective tools for you in helping let people know you're there? We can wear a shirt and says, hey, I care, hand out resource cards. That's sort of being on the job of the organization. But in your day-to-day life, when you're at the supermarket or getting the delivery, what are things that have helped you feel like you're putting the energy of connection out there? Like I said, I'm going to ask you, these aren't boring questions. What I'm saying. So, what does that look like for you?
Well, I'm very open in the Batavia community with the work that I do. So most everybody in the community, I'm very visible in the community, and so lots of people know that I do this work. So it makes it easy for people to ask me about it, even if they're having some problems themselves. I get requests, get calls from people whose children might be suffering. I always have to remind them that I'm not a counselor, that I'm not doing this as a professional counselor, but I'm willing to talk about it with almost anyone. In one comment I want to make before we leave here, Carl, and that is the 1-800-273-8255, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. I don't want people to think they can only call if they're thinking about suicide. I always encourage people, if you're just struggling, if you just need to talk. I get calls all the time from people who start out by saying, look, I'm not suicidal, can I still talk to you? I say, absolutely. Let's just talk about what's making life difficult and what can you learn from that. So, and I often ask people to step out of their life. I had a conversation with a young man. I speak in high schools. A young man called me aside afterwards and said he thought he was depressed, but he hadn't told anyone. We had a long conversation about that. But the thing because he knew his parents loved him, but he hadn't told them yet that he was thinking he was depressed. The thing I asked him, I said, let's fast forward 20 years, and now you have a son who's 18 years old and is feeling the way you're feeling. As a parent, do you want to know? And he looked at me with this sort of startled look in his eyes, and he goes, of course. And then he said to me, now I have the courage to talk to my parents. And he smiled and he walked away. So to ask people to get out of their own life or to think about their lives down the road and what might it look like if you're still here, what might you bring to the world that you won't be able to bring to the world if you choose to end your life. So that's often very helpful.
That's beautiful. And I will sort of go around the horn here. Vikki, what have you found has helped you sort of build connections with people?
Platforms such as this, networking with other people that kind of have a common thread, or even people who don't, because that allows me to reach a venue that I haven't or a group that I have not. So for me, just connect with so many people, you know, and it leads into another group of people that we may have forgotten about. And again, this isn't culture based. This is for everyone. So I think social media and platforms such as the ones that you guys are putting on this weekend are fabulous because it gives you an opportunity to see various aspects and also to be able to connect with people who can provide different resources for what I'm achieving.
Beautiful. Laura, what helps you sort of build those connections?
Honestly, treating every single person I encounter with kindness and with zero judgment. You know, whether I'm in the grocery store, whether I'm, you know, going to a business meeting, whatever it is, there's no judgment, just kindness. And that I have found that through that, the relationships just start to build naturally, you know, because we don't know what path somebody's walking in. It could be a simple thing as just smiling at somebody at the grocery store who you can see is like not having the greatest day. Like that opens the door for conversation, and then it leads to what I do and how I can help, and you know, that type of thing. And so I think that really, like, if we just model with, you know, with that and like lead by example, how would you want to be treated, that type of thing, that just opens the door of opportunity for connections. So, and one thing I did want to add is what you said about painting a picture for tomorrow. I am forever telling parents and kids and everybody that I like work with is when somebody is feeling, you know, hopeless and they're to the point where they feel there's, you know, there is no going on. If we actually instill that little bit of hope by painting a picture of tomorrow, like, hey, when you graduate high school or when you have kids, like that is what saves lives. So I just wanted to say that that's amazing because they're not able to focus. They're not able to see that. And so if we just help them by that, then we can keep them going.
And I put an asterisk in there. What Laura's referring to is if you were to take education programming that the network or the network will produce we have clinically approved sites, but I also produce things from the perspective as a survivor of suicide attempts. And what we'll talk about is that we will define suicide as the point at which somebody reaches a conviction that, in stripping all the technical academic terms out of it, someone reaches the conviction that basically life's always going to suck, that there's no apparent resources or tools out there to fix or address what's going on. And so life's always going to suck. And that's like a black curtain. It's a certainty. It's a conviction. And conviction is not something that you can swoop in and just say, hey, feel better tomorrow. That's not how it works. It's like a metaphysical black curtain. And a way to combat, understanding you can never control someone's personal decisions, but a tool to combat that we suggest is that anything we can do to contribute to help create the down road, the horizon factor, that it's not always going to suck. And it can't just be you'll get over it. What we mean by that is that the conviction comes if there's no opportunities for things to feel better. And someone could listen to a song for 2 minutes, and in those 2 minutes, life doesn't suck so bad. That does not cure anything. That does not remove the pain. But those 2 minutes that it doesn't feel like it sucks can be 2 minutes that give someone a sense that they're not 100% convinced. I hope everyone understands what I mean. So what Laura's talking about is being supporters. One thing that we put in our education is that one of the most powerful tools you can be is someone who helps somebody paint the pictures of tomorrow. And that's about resilience, about if something happens to you that pisses you off, you're looking at, well, okay, now how do we move around that? How do we get around it? That you're not just always hitting a brick wall. And come to our educations and you'll get more of that. But I just wanted to sort of preface that a little bit because I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you, Laura. Sebastian, what helps you build connections with people? What have you found useful?
So just to rewind a little bit to when you were talking about us, putting ourselves out there. Is it okay for me to tell like the story of how we met?
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
can.
that's fine.
I can mention
the whole country. That's fine. Yeah.
Because I think it's a great story. So Angel and I had plans to go to Warped Tour when that was still a thing, and she died just like 2 weeks before Warped Tour. So I decided, well, I'm going to go to Warped Tour anyway, and just kind of, go with her in spirit. And so I'm at Warped Tour. Of course, I'm sad and depressed and like I want to be there, but I don't want to be there. And I'm just kind of moping around. And I kept walking past this Hope for the Day tent that had this sandwich board out in front of it that said, "It's okay not to be okay." And after walking past it literally like probably 30 times, I finally stopped and just thought like, okay, what is this all about? Like, what's going on here? And Carl just happened to be sitting in the booth, which ironically, he told me later on that he wasn't even supposed to be there because he doesn't even like partake in the whole Warped Tour thing.
Yeah, I'm usually not the street team.
He just happened to be there that day. And I literally just walked up to him. He said, "Hey, how's it going?" And I was like, "Bleh," I just lost my daughter to suicide. And we've been friends ever since because he did exactly what he does best and connected with me. And it was maybe a week later, I was sitting in the office of Hope for the Day. And I remembered, I'll never forget, I had 3 of you all telling me, because I'm going on about how like, okay, I have this idea. I want to start this foundation called Angel Forever. And this is what I want to do. And I was prompted to not jump the gun because normally people in my position don't do things like this until at least like the 3 to 5 year mark due to a lot of different factors, but mainly just because of the roller coaster of emotions that I'm going to go through before it even becomes a reality. And I was just so hell bent on doing what I wanted to do. And it turned out that I learned 2 very important things. That I fully understand why people tend to wait a few years because it was definitely a rough start. But at the same time, I feel like, and I definitely believe that this is not for everyone, of course, but it worked amazing things for me personally in my life and in my own just self-care. Starting so early and when everything was just raw to the core made me that much more vulnerable. So it was like everything that I was speaking about and everything that I was, talking to other people about was coming, it's an understatement to say it was coming from the heart. So still, obviously to this day, like there's times where I get emotional and I can't, I can't hide it, which again is just the irony of it all. I think is what makes, for me personally, the work that I'm trying to do that much more impactful. So I don't recommend it for everyone, but I just wanted to jump backwards real quick and throw that in there because, when I'm speaking and I have to, whether it's take a full pause for a minute and then walk away and then come back, or if I can just kind of pull myself together within 30 seconds, 60 seconds, the impact that has on my audience makes my message that much more powerful. And it does way more good to be able to show that than to, be a hypocrite and hide or keep silent what's really going on with me. So what's interesting about the current question is what I think is working great for me now happened by complete mistake. The foundation room space that I got it's an incredible space, but it's kind of divided into two parts. There's like a front room and a back room. I'm a permanent makeup artist when I'm not doing Angel Forever work, and the spa that I own with my wife is right next door. So long story short, she got more services and more employees, and she's like, you have that whole space next door. Like you can make something work. I got to kick you out of here because I need your space. So I now moved my studio to the back end of the foundation room. So now every client that comes in has to enter through the front door of the foundation room and walk through into the back. And it immediately starts a conversation. Like, what is this? What is this space? This is amazing. What's going on here? And so now 99% of my clients, whether they knew me previously, they definitely know me now for, obviously what they're there for, permanent makeup. But they hear about Angel Forever. They hear about what I'm doing with the foundation room. They hear Angel's story. And I would say 70%, maybe even more, maybe even closer to 80% of them will say that they identify. They're like, yes, they've either lost a family member to suicide, or they have a friend that's currently struggling, or they have a teen themselves that's struggling, and then they end up connecting me with their kid. And I mean, it's like the way that it's organically just spreading is amazing. And it was completely by mistake. Well, depending on how you want to look at it, maybe it wasn't a mistake, but.
Thank you. And that, one of the things that I'm constantly reminded of, especially following the work that you've done with your organizations, is every space is a place for mental health, right? Every space is a place to talk mental health. And as we're sort of winding down here, I want to create just a sort of an opportunity to talk about. This can all feel daunting. This can all feel like an intimidating thing, and it can sometimes feel like you're building a sandcastle right at the shoreline, as opposed to trying to create something that can forever shore up a flood or things like that. But I think it's important that we talk about there are victories that come out of this. Even if the victory isn't you're going to necessarily talk someone out of the very point of crisis, sometimes victory is you've started a conversation. And that's where I'm going from what you were talking about there, Sebastian. So really, I kind of want to just, as we're winding down here, I would like to hold the space and just talk about, let's give each other some flowers here. What do you count as a victory or something you're very proud of the work thus far? We understand that it's never about there's an end point, but I think it's important to talk about what have you seen as a victory to date, in any scale and in any way that means to you. We'll start with Laura, if you feel so comfortable.
I mean, so for me, I feel like even if just one, and I always constantly tell myself just one more, just one more. So like, even if me being vulnerable and sharing my pain helps one individual, then that's victorious. But of course, my mission is personal, and I may get emotional, but to me, the greatest joy is knowing that my son is helping save the lives of so many people, and he's living through all the people that have held on, and that because of his story, they're still here in the world carrying on his legacy. And so as his mom, first and foremost, that's like the greatest joy that I could ever find. And then as the founder and executive director of Marshmallow's Hope, obviously, I have found healing. So I have found that there's healing through service, healing through helping others. And so for that, I'm grateful. And, I feel like everything, just like what Sebastian was saying, like I didn't ask for this. I didn't seek it. It just kind of fell on my lap and naturally started to happen. And so that, I know that it's meant to be. I know that there's a greater purpose behind it, and I'm grateful for it.
Thank you so much, Laura. Sebastian.
Can I just say what Laura said verbatim? I mean,
Okay.
I would definitely say specifically the messages that I've gotten from somewhere between 8 and 12 kids that have told me directly that because of Angel Forever, they've decided to, go on. And that just, that's just amazing to me. So like you said, Laura, like I always say, I hear all the time, if all the work that you're doing just helps one person, and yes, that's true. And the work that you do too, Roger. I mean, I'm sure if you did what you've done, how long did you say? 20 something years?
You got to meet Roger.
Trying to unmute. Thank you. 19 years, 12,000 phone calls. Yeah, it's been.
Yeah.
Been
So
a
in
long time.
all of those calls, if you'd only helped one person, yes, it's still worth it. But at the same time, I'm sure we could all agree there's no limit to how many people we hope to help. So yeah, I mean, it's those specific people that have actually said, because of Angel Forever or because of Angel, I didn't take my life, or I've decided to go on. And that's amazing. And then definitely I agree 100% with everything Laura said, but also just knowing that yeah, sometimes it really is just so hard.
It's okay.
By just keeping Angel's spirit alive through Angel Forever, it's helped me, and I don't know where I'd be without it, to be honest. I could have gone a completely different direction, but taking on this work and creating this foundation and just developing a passion for helping others has has done amazing things for me as well. You know, I'm a much better person because of it.
Me too.
Thank you so much for that. And Roger, what do you see as a celebration?
I could tell you thousands of stories, thousands of times when people have ended a phone call and they found something about themselves or something about their life that makes it worthwhile for them to go on. But people say to me all the time, you've probably saved hundreds or thousands of lives in your time on the suicide hotline. And my answer is always the same. I've never saved a single life in 19 years. But I've had the privilege to be on the phone with thousands of people who have found the courage to save their own. And that's the real gift. The real gift is being on the phone when somebody finds the courage to go on, when it'd be easier not to. So that, for me, those are the victories.
That's beautiful. And we were, we had a minor technical difficulty with Vikki. It's just a connection situation. And what I was going to do was see if we could get a soundbite from her, and I'm just going to call her. And I figure, you adapt, adjust, do what you can. That's resilience. You got to find a way. Vikki, we have you. You're tuning in live. Why don't you share with us what you consider a victory? Yeah, I can see this is Vikki.
I can hear.
Vikki, you're good to go.
Okay, I'm second question.
What do you consider a what do you count as a victory thus far?
Oh wow! You mean in my advocacy?
Yes.
Constantly being referred by individuals asking for assistance for their family members' behavioral health treatment. Even being an advocate for helping get behavioral health backs up it. That's another thing for me. Also being able to continue to speak and tell their stories on different platforms. We can reach other people in need. Those are all for me.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Vikki, and thank you for playing along with the adjustment. I appreciate it. Thank you. The fact is that we're never going to be able to unpack all the different things, and we could be here for a very long time. Lord knows I love chatting with all of you. And I want those who are with us right now watching, and if you engage this content in the days and weeks afterwards, to really rewind and listen through the brilliant nuggets of wisdom and insight that our guests have shared with us. I'm going to share with you all now, and I like to just make sure, because from full disclosure, as it's been established, I've had the privilege of getting to know these individuals, and I'll say personally, but also so much maybe introduced in a professional capacity, have gotten to know them in very diverse ways. I engaged Roger in a community coalition, I believe, where we were trying to confront teen-focused suicide and mental health issues in a county in Illinois, DuPage County of Illinois. I had the privilege of meeting Vikki Webster almost by happenstance, and we intersected in a discussion, a group discussion, an intersection that was focused on confronting mental health within African American males. Sebastian talked about our origin story, as it were. I was with a different organization some time ago, and just by luck happened to be manning the booth tent when he came in, and we started a conversation. Laura and I met through someone who we were connected to in a previous organization, and we were connected through a veteran connection, but it was more than that. The individual was also very passionate about mental health for their family, and I was told, hey, there's this fabulous human being who's got an organization. They're very passionate about mental health and suicide prevention, because of their family's experiences. And Laura, I'm glad you brought it up. And I've said it to each one of you before, that because of the way stigma works in mental health, when we get to the point of talking about suicide, we want to put it into this little box. We want to hide it away, and it's shameful. And among all the different things from the drop-down menu that does, when it's the person who has passed away and their immediate family members, that isolates them. It robs a whole human life of a before, of their growing up, of all the things that made them them, and shrinks them just down to one action. And that's it. That's all they were. And everything that was before is gone, and everything that we forward will only be isolated, because that's what stigma will do. It'll rob humanity. Each one of these individuals has found a way to, through telling the story, give life and dignity back to the individual. And it is not hippy-dippy whatever, and there's nothing wrong with hippy-dippy stuff, by the way, but it is not to out of this book say that these lives live forward and continue to grow and resonate and ripple into the living, breathing world, even though they are not physically with us anymore. Because through telling the stories, as Roger has highlighted, through telling these stories, and I hope everyone is paying attention to this, because throughout the festival, we have been talking about how art and music, you publish it, you produce it, you put it out there. Years move on, and someone could be touched by it and engaged by it, and it can change their lives. In that very direct one-to-one way, with the work that Vikki and Laura and Sebastian have done, and the work that Roger also does, and every single day they are putting out ripples that will go on and echo and have the power to touch and change people's lives. Each one of you are contributing, and in this very specific cases, when we talk about Vikki, Laura, and Sebastian, we're talking about empowered through Reginald, Paul, Zachary, and Angel. They're like shining beacons who, if we let stigma control the conversation, it's a dark thing that stays in a tight little box and we never talk about. We're not celebrating suicide, but we are celebrating lives that were lived and the humanity of them through telling their stories. And you are 1,000% right, when even if it's just one soul breaks that conviction and thinks that it's not always going to suck, and we've brought them one more day, or we've brought them a chance to start a conversation that they weren't having, that moves mountains and changes universes. And if you don't believe me, ask the loved ones of that individual who don't have to say goodbye to that person. And you all know this from the intimate experiences you've had. I would speak to it in a selfishly way of saying that, talk to anyone who knows me. And I'm not using this to be self-promotional, but if I hadn't found a way to reach out for support, if I had always been convinced it sucked and continued to try to take my own life as I had once done, I would not have met any of these people that you see on camera, and Vikki, who's still with us right now. And we would not have been able to continue to do the work that we're doing and try to impact others' lives. Your lives have meanings, and this all matters. I want to thank each and every one of you for sharing your stories and making time for us. And I want to hold this space to close out by, I want to give each one of you a chance to just give your closing thoughts and words. And also, even though we've got all the hyperlinks and everything, please, 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 let's get some shout outs for where people can find you and your great work. Regardless if you have a regional sort of orientation to what you're doing, I want people to be able to find and look into your stories and lives a little bit more. Vikki, are you still with us?
I'm still here.
Okay, so Vikki, if you could give us some shout outs, some closing words, and then let people know where they can find you.
Again, we're doing our Brothers for Advocacy work. You can on Facebook, Reginald Sewell Foundation. You can also find at ReginaldSewell.com. We're on Instagram, we have a Twitter page. I think I tagged email address, phone numbers, so I'm reaching any of those platforms.
Thank you so much, Vikki. Roger, where can people find yourself in closing words, please?
The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline.org or 1-800-273-8255. For me personally, I have a personal website. It's just my initials and my last name, aribreisch.com. People can find out more about me and the work that I do there. And I thank you for the invitation to be here.
Thank you, Roger. Sebastian?
I want to first thank you for everything that you do. I think Carl is truly one of the most incredible people that I've ever met in my life. I just really want to point that out. You're an amazing individual. Angelforever.org is my website. Most main social media platforms, Angel Forever Foundation, specifically for Instagram or Facebook. You can also see the foundation room. I've got a lot of photos and stuff. I'm very proud of the space that I've created. It has a lot of angel in it. And really just, I can't emphasize enough to everyone that to kind of play off of what you were just talking about, Carl. I'm an attempt survivor myself. I've also somehow managed to survive a flatline overdose. I'm a recovering addict. I have been to hell and back at least a dozen times throughout my life. And the fact that I'm still here is truly amazing and truly a gift, because it doesn't always suck. Sometimes it really does suck, but if you can just manage to get through, even if it's 1 minute at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 day at a time, eventually, sometimes, it's a shorter period of time, sometimes it's a longer period of time, but I promise all of you that eventually it doesn't suck. I can attest to that. I don't even know how many times over.
Thank you so much, Sebastian. Laura?
So I can be reached at Laura and that's LAURA at marshmallowshope.org. My phone number is actually, pointing this way. It's right there. Marshmallowshope.org. All of our social media is just Marshmallows Hope, except for Twitter. It's Hope for Z. And so, yeah, you guys can reach out to me via social media. We are trying to take our efforts to a national level. And so, if you know of anybody that could use our services, we're here to show support and to help. And so, Carl, yeah, I'm really proud of what the Hope for Us Network is doing. You guys are one of our partners in this national effort that we are taking to bring change. And so I'm really grateful for you, and knowing you and what you're doing today is amazing. And I'm grateful to have been a part of it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I want to thank all of you for making time for us. Each one of you are a beautiful soul, and modern beings putting energy and change out into this universe. And we're better for having each of you here. And that's going to wind down raising visibility. So thank you all for joining us. Appreciate it. Thank you to all our guests. And in closing, I just want to share with everyone, please take time to watch and rewatch this, share with friends and family. connections might be having a little bit of trouble. I hope I'm not roboting too much on people's screens. But we're going to keep the festival going. We have still more great guests and content to come. So this is going to end this part of the series, Raising the Visibility. We're going to be jumping right into an interview with our guests from the Sound Mind organization. And just for some housekeeping, please support the work that we're doing and support the artists who are part of this. We have collab merch and raffle tickets and all those things you can find at aguh.org. We also have a private screening tonight for 2 short films. They are also, to get tickets for that, you can get them at aguh.org. So again, thank you to all of our guests, Roger, Sebastian, Laura, and Vikki. You're amazing people. And I hope everyone makes an effort to follow up and look at these websites and links, support these organizations. They're doing great, amazing work. And thank you all for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.